MonsterVerse King Ghidorah terrorized moviegoers in only one film of Hollywood's Godzilla franchise, and like that blockbuster, he did not last long within the Showa Era. But what about the rest of the continuity? How would MonsterVerse Ghidorah's short-lived reign of terror impact the rest of the timeline? Well, today we explore that very idea as I ask here on What If Kaiju for a third and final time, what if Legendary's Ghidorah was in Godzilla's Showa Era? To immediately set the stage and briefly recap the last two parts since it has been nearly a year, the year is 1964. Infant Island has been thrust upon the world stage, with world governments lobbying for Mothra's influence over the Showa Era monsters, since she can communicate with them and ultimately direct them not to attack their countries. To curry favor with the Shobijin, green policies, or those at least which would benefit the Earth's ecosystem as a whole, would slowly be enacted, while Monster Island is created to house the world's strongest monsters a few years earlier than in the original timeline. Now, this would include King Kong, what the world believes at least to be the strongest monster on the planet, along with others like Rodan, Gorosaurus, Godzilla, and more. So a year passes by, 1965 comes into existence, and you're probably asking, do we see an Exilian invasion of some sort after humanity lands on Planet X? And, well, no. There is no Showa Ghidorah here, so the aliens already lack a considerable powerhouse to call upon. Also, with Godzilla and Rodan living their lives on Monster Island, there is no need for the aliens' help in containing them. So really, without any leverage and with Monster Island monitored by the world governments, the Exilians would have to play the long game here. They can't just invade, or their superior saucer technology would be overwhelmed by sheer numbers. So the Exilians introduce themselves to the world without the promise of some miracle cure, donning wide smiles while they sheath their sinister intent, for now at least. 1966 originally brought forth the events of Godzilla vs. the Sea Monster, but numerous factors would erase the Red Bamboo organization from existence. For one, MonsterVerse Ghidorah would have attacked their sprouting base in Part 2. And as I mentioned in the last part, if they attempted to enslave Infant Island natives, the world government would lead a task force to squash the terrorist organization. So ultimately, the Red Bamboo fails to sprout in this timeline. What ultimately does come to pass is a war of the Gargantuas, which would have a very different ending in this timeline. Thanks to Infant Island's Shobijin and Mothra's ability to communicate with Kaiju, Japan would request assistance in dealing with Gara. Mothra would arrive, attempt communication merely for the Green Gargantua to ignore the Guardian and attack. With Mothra and the military working together, Gara would be easily overwhelmed until Sanda comes to his aid. But, like the film, Gara's betrayal and Sanda's appreciation for humanity would eventually cause the brothers to pick opposing sides. Though with Mothra able to assist, Gara should be far, far easier to defeat than in the original timeline. Thus, Sanda lives to see another day as another peaceful denizen of Monster Island, making up for one resident who has recently departed, aka Godzilla. See, he's forcibly departed Monster Island in search of a distant distress from one oversized egg. Why this is happening in 1966 instead of 1967 is twofold. For one, King Ghidorah's weather manipulation would place greater importance on any technology that could also control the weather. And two, with a focus on green tech from the Shobijin, such technology could become powerful leverage for Japan, even if we as the audience know based out of Godzilla and Mothra: The Battle for Earth, that the Guardians of Mothra would actually be quite displeased at any advancements from humanity to essentially control Earth's weather. Anyway, issues arise. Giant insects terrorize Soko Island, and eventually, Kumonga is bested by Godzilla and Minya. Really, there are no grand changes to the events of the film, Son of Godzilla. However, what this ultimately does do is attract the eye of one mad scientist, Doctor Who. Slight tangent, but I do realize King Kong Escapes is mostly inspired by the King Kong show from 1966, the animated Japanese anime. But for the sake of this scenario and all future what ifs that I'm going to have in the Showa Era timeline, I'm just going to ignore its issues with size and, where it fits in the timeline and just include it in canon. Brief aside over. Now you may be asking, why would Doctor Who go after Godzilla? And the answer is the same reason you use DoorDash or Uber Eats, aka convenience. See, whenever Mechanicon fails to excavate Element X, Doctor Who will need a monster to unearth his precious irradiated deposits. While he may have some admiration for Kong, the Great Ape's location on Monster Island would ensure King Kong's recruitment as a non-factor. Thus, the currently isolated and hibernating Godzilla would be the Doctor's perfect target. And if taken alone, it's pretty plausible, if not not certain that Godzilla would remain under Doctor Who's thumb for the rest of the era. So long as the scientist remains tight-lipped on his mining method, would anyone really care enough to go searching if Godzilla vanished? I don't think so. What stops this dark fate from happening though is Minya, who I could see Doctor Who taking prisoner as further leverage for the giant. This is a horrible idea in retrospect because the high frequency ear-splitting squeal the little one emits would probably snap Godzilla out of his hypnosis. So Godzilla battles Mechanicon, a mech who you might be surprised actually has an edge in this. Yeah, no. The Doctor and the robot are both toast, along with the base. Thus, after a thorough onslaught, the pair returned to Monster Island sometime in 1967, and from here on out, the world enters a period of peace until it gets hit by another cosmic horror. No, not Ghidorah, Hedorah. The arrival of the toxic invader will naturally tick off Godzilla, drawing him to Japan's mainland. However, if you think the military sees Godzilla as the solution to this pollution problem, you are very much mistaken. See, Hedorah's radioactive immunity and near invulnerability renders Godzilla a non-factor here. They have absolutely no qualms in recruiting King Kong via Mothra to remedy the situation. And to help, they plan on supercharging him with giant electrodes. Beast and man working side by side against a common threat. While Godzilla would no doubt still assist, Kong is the one who ultimately conquers another invader with his electrical touch, albeit with great difficulty. Hedorah's acidic sludge would be immensely corrosive upon the ape's flesh, if not electrified first. Though this win, even if it is costly, would once again solidify King Kong as the strongest monster on the planet to the general populace, even though he is really carried by Hedorah's dehydrating weakness to electricity and the general green trend going on right now. See, because of the greater investment into renewable technologies and anti-pollution measures, Hedorah's growth would have been slowed, not by much, but by a good chunk, and would have given Kong another edge in this fight. Again, the growth rate wouldn't have altered the outcome all that much, even if Hedorah was at full size, but what it does do is alter the worldwide investment into such green technologies. Less pollution, less waste, and ultimately more renewable resources would be forever linked to national defense. For there is nothing stopping another Hedorah from arriving, so even greater pressure forces world governments to enact the reforms first installed by the Showa. But enough of hypothetical policies and distant politics. You're probably curious about the Nebula M invasion in 1971, right? Well, things are not so simple. While in part 1 I did speculate what might happen if MonsterVerse Ghidorah won and he was forced to contend with his Showa Era counterpart, for this final part, I'll be sticking more to the premise that Legendary's Ghidorah truly replaced Showa Ghidorah. So the Nebulans, in their hopes to conquer 3.7 billion people, have a single 50-meter tall cybernetic chicken. Shockingly, high hopes I do not have for their success. Strong? Sure, Gigan is easily comparable to that of Godzilla or King Kong. But that is the key issue. Gigan could theoretically win a 1v1 with any Earth monster, but regrettably, he is alone. So either the Nebulans carry on with their plan, ensuring their own defeat, or they wait, remaining in Japan's shadows for an opportunity to strike. This outcome is also very much like what Zootopia is doing right now, as they wouldn't harbor the same resentment against the surface. Nuclear tests would be ramped down with the Showagen's influence on world governments, meaning the underwater civilization doesn't attack with Megalon in 1973. They're furious at the surface dwellers, but not desperate enough to risk their god. Yet. This new period of peace comes to a silent end though, with the black hole alien's secret arrival on Earth. For all these otherworldly forces now have something to gain from one another. For the Nebulans, Gigan has an ally to call upon. For the Zootopians, Exilian technology can ensure Megalon is under their full control. For the Exilians, they now have a method to create monsters using their stockpiled resources after almost a decade of trade with humanity. Technology would be shared. Each alien species agrees to different spheres of influence after their ensured victory against humanity, and as their mechs start to come online, the alliance is solidified, though ultimately not without some cracks. But more on those later. For now, in 1974, the invasion begins. Megalon rises from the depths. Gigan descends from the stars upon Monster Island, beside a trio of mecha Kongs? Yeah, I don't know about you, but I think Doctor Who's next of kin is gonna sue somebody. Now, this may seem like an odd choice for the machines to resemble King Kong, but to the world, King Kong is considered the strongest monster. Therefore, that is what the black hole aliens wish to surpass, and surpass they do. These Mechakongs are packing far more firepower than Doctor Who's creation. They have durability, firepower, and menace of the normal Showa Era timeline Mechagodzilla. Even if King Caesar somehow made it to Monster Island, the residents, which include monsters like Anguirus, Godzilla, Minya, Mothra, King Kong, Gorosaurus, Kumonga, Sanda, and more, just can't compete with the invaders. Though they would not be killed, they aren't really spared either, as they are quickly turned into puppets. The invaders unleash their monstrous army upon Tokyo to set an example, and when the city is nothing more than rubble, the world is forced to come to terms with, well, the aliens' terms. Now, in some scenarios, I can see the aliens coming out on top and fully conquering the Earth. I mean, not even a rejuvenated MonsterVerse Ghidorah could stand up to this alien threat. However, two factors essentially keep the chances of such a future statistically remote. The first is humanity, who in the Showa Era is actually quite adept at ruining alien schemes without monstrous help. Years of build-up on the aliens' part would also give nations like Japan plenty of time to uncover or possibly prevent the grand invasion via espionage. Second, and more importantly, the Exilians, given enough time, would eventually prove the alien alliance's greatest weakness. If the invasion proved a success, I have no doubt the Exilians would ultimately backstab the other races, leading to an internal civil war. On the complete other end of the spectrum, 10 years of human coexistence would no doubt influence plenty of Exilians, just as we saw with Namikawa's relationship with Glenn, creating a divide between those on Earth, who have come to love their new world, and those on Planet X, who still consider Earth a target of conquest. Now for me, of all the ways that I could see this alliance and the invasion ultimately falling through, and the one I think I prefer the most, is the Exilians on Earth turning against the other aliens and their kin on Planet X. So secrets and methods to fight back are passed along to humanity, ultimately freeing the monsters and allowing them to fight their previous alien overlords. Mechs are destroyed, aliens perish by the thousands, and as the final remnants of the invaders are blown out of the sky, humanity arises triumphant against those who live amongst the stars. Monster Island returns to a state of peace, with the world gradually starting to question if King Kong is truly the strongest monster. The Exilians who turn traitor are no doubt ostracized by the people of Earth, setting up a difficult future for them upon their new homeworld. While Ghidorah stays dead, unlike his legacy, which is scarred into the psyche of every person on Earth. Because ultimately, if MonsterVerse Ghidorah existed in the Showa Era, while he probably wouldn't last long if he lost his first battle, his existence would act as a warning of the dangers of space throughout the rest of the Showa Era. Such threats may take on different forms, or attack the Earth in different ways, but ultimately, only together, as in monster and man working side by side, can the Earth truly overcome the monstrous threats lingering amongst the stars. And that concludes this What If, ultimately ending my second universe. And, you know, if I already have 2 done, I might as well get a 3rd out of the way. You know, good things come in 3s. So next time, you can expect What If Gamera was in the Heisei universe Part 5 to be released in 3 weeks' time. But if you haven't already, remember to like and subscribe. I'm GrayShot151, and I'll catch you all next time. Until then, later.